Hello, my name is Terrence Mitchell. I'm the Vice President for Diversity. Oops, 10 count. Hi, I'm Terrence Mitchell. I'm the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at California, Clarion, and Edinburgh. And through Edinburgh, I want to welcome you to our second Diversity Dialogue of the semester. And we're very pleased to have my dear colleague, Ms. Elise Michaux. I met Melissa while I was working at Slippery Rock last year. I was very engaged by her presence as a council trustee member. I think she's the youngest council trustee member. She does wonderful work there, and now she lives here in Erie with a lot of us. So I'm very excited about her observations of what we're doing in Erie. We don't have a long presentation for you today. It's going to be about 30 minutes, and there'll be time for questions at the end of the presentation. But I'm going to step back and let her introduce herself to you and tell you more about herself. Thank you so much for being here with us, Elise.
Thank you for having me, Terrence. I'm excited to be here.
So why don't you give them a deeper introduction than I did and let them know more about yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's actually incorporated into my presentation. So sure. If we're ready to rock and roll, I can give the intro into the presentation and we can go from there. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
All right. We'll wait for our friends to queue it up for us. We'll go from there.
It's just gonna take a moment. There we go.
Beautiful. I'm going to escape out of here. All right. So again, thank you to Dr. Terrence Mitchell for having me for a part of these diversity dialogues. Again, my name is Elise Michaux. I go by E, and we're going to talk about lessons learned in higher education, diversity in higher education, right? Over the past 5 years, I've really done work to kind of genuinely weave diversity, equity, and inclusion into the work that I do as a professional. It hasn't been a part of my main functions, but I'm going to delve into how I've kind of done that over the past few years. And I hope from the presentation you learn a few things, but the piece I hope you get the most is that if we're doing this work intentionally and genuinely, it could be done well and felt by the people that we are trying to reach the most. Next slide. So everybody's seen this pretty picture of me, and the hair is looking a little different right now, but I've been in higher ed for about 8 years at this moment, and which is just wild to think about for me as I was preparing for this. And I've had 3 roles in my short career, and in looking at it now, I recognize how I'm at this point where I genuinely care about how this work is prevalent on our campuses. For example, when I was spending time at Robert Morris as an academic advisor, I was working there as someone who was overseeing the men and women's basketball teams. And the most unique opportunity I had as a counselor was to teach a first-year seminar class that was with a room full of men from Saudi Arabia. And before I got there, everybody said to me, oh, you're going to have to make sure you lay down the law and make sure that they know you're in charge, and you're going to have to really be someone who commands the stage. But let me tell you, it was very different than that. They were some of the most respectful group of young men that I have ever worked with. And I'm still friends with some of them to this day. But the stereotypes and things and the seeds that people were trying to plant in my mind had me go in with a certain mindset. And I'm so glad that I had that opportunity, because especially at that point in time, this was about 2013, 2014, lots of things were still up in the air about how we felt about folks of that descent. And I'm so glad that I had that to kind of break down those barriers and those stereotypes for myself. Then shortly after Robert Morris, I landed a position as the Director of Student Leadership and Involvement at Seton Hill University. I spent about 6 years there. And in my time there, I worked very closely with my good friend and mentor, Dr. Jessica Mann, to ensure that our student leaders were being trained on these diversity and inclusion efforts, right? We knew that they were going to be dealing with students from all over, And we wanted them to have a little bit of the language so that they were being inclusive in their practices as well, right? And so in doing that, I recognized my own passion for this work and even got called upon, because other people were starting to recognize that, I even got called upon to work with our campus security and police officers to ensure that they are up to snuff on some of the things around this topic. And so that was a privilege. And then to work with our resident assistants and what they were doing in the day-to-day of their practices. All of that was experiences now that I understand in retrospect that have really sparked in me. And so that kind of shifted my priorities into from, wanting to make sure that the students were having fun and learning a little bit too at Seton Hill to who has access to higher education. And now serving in the role as Director of Enrollment Management at EC3, it's been a privilege to hear some of the stories of people who are 60, 70 years old thinking that college education was something that they would never get. And now here we are. So that gives you a little bit of background about me. Even in my time at Seton Hill, I worked outside of Seton Hill at the Westmoreland Art Museum and did multiple presentations over there with them and their staff and local teachers to provide education around these topics. So I see myself as someone who is an advocate behind the scenes, ensuring that this kind of work is prevalent. So it hasn't been a main role for me, I'm going to say yet, which I think is soon to come, but it's certainly something that I find valuable. We can go on to the next slide. So what we're going to dive into today, and this is where I really, really hope that you learn something from what we're going to discuss today. The topics at hand, right? The role we all play in DEI work. This isn't something that's just for your chief diversity officer. This is something that each of us should understand and make happen on our campuses in a prevalent way. The next is hiring intentionally. I'm very passionate about this area. It's what I'd like to do my doctoral research on. I know many of us can speak to being on hiring and search committees and feeling like, okay, how do we hire someone who is diverse? And I just want to talk a little bit about our thinking around that topic. And last but not least, being consistent in cross-campus efforts. It's important that we're being we aren't just saying something when there's a national tragedy, that we are consistently sending the cues and the messages to the folks who are seen as less than in this country, that they matter on our campuses. So those are the three things we're going to dive into today, and I hope you get something from it. We can move on to the next slide. First, the role we all play in DEI work. Reframing how DEI work is viewed. So many see this work as cumbersome and something that is a difficult conversation, right? And can we reframe that to be something where we invite those who may feel that way to say that it's not difficult, but maybe that it's just uncomfortable. And it's only uncomfortable because we don't talk about it enough, right? I think of my own high school and elementary school experience where it's not something that was comfortable for anybody to discuss. And we're even battling it to this day with critical race theory in our classrooms, right? How can we invite others to the table and those who may have that bit of trepidation to the conversation so that they can begin to learn and understand and feel empowered around this topic? Uplifting the voices that are already present, right? We have so many champions and advocates on our campuses who really get it and want to dive into this work. Empower them to empower others on your campus so they don't get burnt out, right? Inviting them to be a part of conversations where policies and procedures are being discussed. These are ways in which we can say that we believe you matter, and you matter to us as a whole. So, invite those people to carry on this message so that they might spark others to join in on this work. And it really ties back to my first point around the DEI work. and how it's viewed. If more people are spreading the message, then we're not just singing to the choir as we do our workshops and presentations on our campus. More people will believe in the message if we have lots of different people sending that messaging out. Next, we have ensuring that each of us does our individual learning. It's not just on those in the marginalized community to share with you about their lived experiences. My colleague and I'll mention her name a couple times probably throughout this, Dr. Jess Mann and I, when we do presentations on these topics, we say, what are you reading? What are you watching? Who are they by, right? Can you watch something by Ava DuVernay or can you read something by Maya Angelou? These are all ways in which we can make sure that we're also taking our own personal advocacy to ensure that we know agency, I should say, to ensure that we know and are familiar with the language and the culture. We won't know everything and we aren't perfect, but certainly we can work to educate ourselves in our free time if we care, right? And that shows, those are efforts that show that you do. Next slide, please. Hiring intentionally. Like I said, I'm looking forward to doing my research around this topic as it is very, very important. Again, I think many of us can identify with sitting on search committees and the conversations that happen in the room. And yes, we want to be invited to be a part of your campuses, but there are things that we have to consider. And so whether you're the person leading the search or you're sitting on the search or you're the person to be hired, we have to think about what it is that we are looking for. So is the candidate a good fit? It's not just about being diverse, right? Can that person do what you need them to do on your campus? And it ties into my next point of thinking about where you are strategic planning and goal setting for your offices, your departments, your campus. How does this person's skill set fit into the larger purpose and goal? These are all things to consider when you're hiring. And may I say here as well that some of the skills that Black and Brown specifically people bring to the table can't always be quantified on a resume. So it's important that you recognize that and take those types of things into consideration as well. I've seen someone not get hired because, well, they didn't have XYZ. Well, their lived experiences bring something to the classroom. It was actually someone who was going to be teaching teachers. Oh my goodness, what an missed opportunity to have that person leading the classroom for those students, because some of her experiences that she has had are something that you can't necessarily put on a resume that can be taught to others so that, other future teachers can be seen and heard, and you learn a couple things as well. Diversity hires, right, can do more harm than good. What will the message be to the larger community, right? Is that person going to be seen as, well, so-and-so is just the X hire, right? And that doesn't send a strong message right from the beginning. So that person is already behind from where they possibly could be. So if it's up to us to really ensure that we're setting our folks up that we hire for success. And tying into the next point, is our campus welcoming to members who may not look like the majority? I think that's something to consider and something to be forthright with folks who we are looking to hire. Our community at large, right? And I know that makes it even trickier in some of the places that, especially our PASHE schools where they sit. Are we being open and honest with them about what it is that they're going to be facing, right? And I think, again, that level of honesty right from the beginning is important and can be something that builds trust and where our campuses are, and thinking about diversity and inclusion efforts right on our campus, not even just our towns or our cities, but where our campus is. Having those forthright conversations from the beginning can truly be transformative and setting our folks up for success. And last but certainly not least, working to ensure that all diversity is considered equally as valuable. Okay? Whether it's folks from the disabled community, the trans community, the gay community, insert marginalized community here, everybody, all diversity matters, okay? And to make decisions based off of one or the other, no one wins. So let's make sure that we are working to celebrate it all. Next slide. Okay, this is our last slide here. Consistency in cross-campus efforts. Right? I kind of talked about trust in that last slide, where it builds trust. It sends a message to our larger campus, our faculty, staff, and students that these efforts matter and what we do matters, and how we exist in this world and in this space and in our campuses matters. If we're constantly being reactive instead of proactive, what does that say? No matter what kind of business you're in, and we're in the business of educating others. And I believe that if we are consistent in our efforts in hiring chief diversity staffs and doing events like this on our campus, it sends a message loud and clear that who you are matters and difference matters. Find what works and keep doing it. If diversity dialogues is something that's going well on your campus, keep doing it and assess where people are in that, so that you can do more or fix. All of that is a part of working to move the needle. And again, goes back to that first slide as well, keeping people a part of the conversation and hearing where they are helps you to decide what needs to happen next. Are there opportunities where you can do diversity dialogues, but maybe put a little twist on it to keep it fresh, or I don't know, maybe you invite a student next time to be the speaker. These are things that go such a long way on our campuses and can really bolster the efforts that folks are trying to make. Be open to feedback. People will give you their feedback. They always want to weigh in and give their 2 cents. So, and be humble about it, because sometimes we'll miss the mark. We're not perfect, but certainly if we remain open and honest and have those spaces where that open dialogue can happen, we'll watch our successes come to pass. Work to be proactive and not reactive. I kind of mentioned that earlier. It's so important, because again, it sends a message to the larger community that it's something that we value, and what you value, you're consistent about, right? I value my job, so I come here every day and make sure that I'm doing what I need to be doing, because I want to be of value to the work that I'm doing in the community at large. So keeping that in mind is very, very important. Celebrating all types of diversity. Again, I think that, there's a month for every heritage now, and I think that that's one way we can do it. But what are the other ways that we can do and ensure that we're celebrating all types of diversity? Do they take to Instagram and do an Instagram takeover when it's just the student being themselves? It's no holiday or anything like that, but it's a person that is different and can share a little bit about their lived experiences. The more we bolster those types of people, and without doing the tokenism piece, right? And there's a way to do that. Again, it sends the message that these folks in our community greatly matter. And last but not least, include minority student groups and other voices in decisions about policies and procedures. Again, our students, I learn something from my students every day. And It's one of the reasons that I got into higher education. Even as a sophomore, in as a first year seminar leader in college at Slippery Rock, those students taught me something. And I've kind of kept that mentality, especially studying student affairs, that anybody can teach you something, and I think sometimes we get so high up, on the hiring scale, that we forget what it was like to be boots on the ground, and our students can really teach us things. And not saying that you have to take everything that they say or do, but keeping those things in perspective is very, very important. Next slide, please. Having a diverse workforce is just the first step. Ensuring they feel that they belong and are heard is the next, right? It's something that you really should keep in perspective, and it's up to all of us to ensure that this work is prevalent and done well. I believe in us and how we are approaching this work, but we're not perfect, and maybe we'll never arrive, but working towards it is how we continue to move the needle. And the last slide, please, I'll take that next, is just plug in to follow me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, available via email as well. I appreciate you all being here and being in attendance. I hope you got something from it. And I'm open to any questions you might have or any feedback you might give. Again, I'm still working towards understanding this work as well. So Terrence, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Elise. That was a wonderful presentation. I
Thank you.
have a question for you myself, though, because as you were talking, I didn't realize it was 3 campuses you've worked on so far. You know,
Yeah.
we've talked about you're at least a couple of decades younger than I am, so I think I underestimated your professional experience. But wonderful presentation. So talk to me a little bit about, though. So you've worked up and down Northwest Pennsylvania. Talk to me about the observation you made about Northwest PA students that people might not know. And I'm thinking about both underrepresented students and majority students. What are the possibilities that we're sleeping on?
Yeah, I think one thing that always comes to mind for me initially is that so many of our students come from towns where they did not have people who looked like me, right? They graduated with a class of 60 some, and there might have been one Black person or one Asian student. And so again, I think my experience comes from first seminar. That's how I got my first taste of student affairs, is that the classroom space where we say to ourselves, okay, we need to ensure that we're having conversations from the jump about what diversity is. These students, a lot of folks now, I think in the coming years, this next generation that's coming up, they're going to know a lot more because we're talking about it so much. But the students currently on our campus are lacking in these areas. And we only get better by facing what's uncomfortable, not difficult, what's uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the things that we're missing. And on the opposite side, I think it's the same for our Black students. Black students have been, Black and brown, I'll say, have been in areas where everybody looks like them. And so they're getting culture shock as well on our campuses, especially, again, think of where our campuses are housed. So how do they face the racism that they get at county fair, the microaggressions they get at Sheets, or someone's following them when they're at the Mill Creek Mall? These are things that they're not typically used to. So again, and when we hear these things come up, we have to be open and honest about these conversations. Let's start at orientation. Let's talk about these things at orientation before you even arrive. We're making sure that we're having these conversations with our students so that they're prepared. We can't save them from everything, but certainly we can give them the tools in which they might be equipped to handle what might arise.
People ask me how the field has changed over the years. When I was doing diversity work back in the 1990s, you started every semester with a conversation about, let me tell you what's wonderful about this town, and there's also, let me tell you what's not so wonderful about this town.
That's it.
And you did it you weren't, the 90s weren't filtered. You did it without any worries that anybody was going to be any backlash or anything like
Mhm.
that. You were just trying to provide a realistic base for students. I don't
Yes.
suggest that we go back to some of the immaturity of the 90s work, because it was
Come
immature.
on.
But
Yes.
using the skills we have now, having those same discussions in ways that help people prepare for the environment that they're entering. One thing I think it'll help do, when they meet peers who are open, I think they'll appreciate them more. Like,
Absolutely.
okay, so here's somebody who, even if they don't know a lot about people who aren't like them, they're really willing to learn, and also shutting down those people who they don't have to spend time with. If,
On.
if someone's not smart and they're trying to take you into a negative space, and that's not where you want to go, you should have the tools to be able to do that too. Thank you very much for your opinion. I'm gonna go and get some sushi.
Okay.
We have to give them more realistic coping skills. I wanted to ask you one other question though, too, Elise. And
Sure.
this question is a little bit personal, so if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I've been really enjoying getting to know you and really enjoying getting to know your path. So where do you see yourself like in 10 years? With this great beginning you have in our education, where do you see yourself going?
Yeah. Like I kind of said at the beginning, this has kind of bubbled to the top for me, DEI work. I do see myself eventually as working towards a chief diversity role. It's something that has become something that I just truly, truly am passionate about. I think I have the superpowers of being patient and kind when a lot of people will just go off the handles.
Right.
And my background coming from an all white area in Connellsville, I was appreciated that that's one of the first lines in the press release that they did, that I'm from Connellsville. There were not a lot of people who looked like me in my city. And so it has allowed me the gravitas, I don't know if that's the word I want, to be in spaces where I can be respected, but also speak the lingo so that we can move the needle on efforts. And I kind of want to use, and one of my friends quoted me, I forgot I even told her this, I want to use my Black powers for good. And there's just unfortunately, because of the stigmas and the stereotypes about around us, how we do our hair, how we carry ourselves, the angry Black woman. I trying to combat that in spaces is something that I think I can finesse and do well, and work to make some things happen on a college campus. So all of that to say, probably working towards the chief diverse. Got to get this doc first too, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, not necessarily. I have lots of colleagues who became chief diversity officers. That I became one, and they helped me finish my doc. So
You sure did.
yeah. So
As you being a newly added mentor for me, so I appreciate you.
well, and I appreciate you also. And one of the things we have about 44 people watching us live, and thank you so much for being here. One of the
I
things One of the reasons why I invited Alicia, guys, was because I've been watching up and down Northwest Pennsylvania and monitoring. There's so much talent up and down Northwest Pennsylvania. I think really the key to us doing good diversity work is using some of these younger professionals and really placing them in positions where they're able to influence the work we're going to do. And when I see us growing by leaps and bounds in the students understanding their ability to form community with each other, and when difficult issues coming up, us being able to work through those difficult issues. So thank you so much, Elise, for being here. And
Oh, my pleasure.
even though we know we had 40 people now, we know that our diversity dialogues sometimes they go into skyrocket numbers afterwards. I believe this will be one of the most popular ones. Thank you so much.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for having me, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Edinburgh. Thank you, Dr. Terrence Mitchell, and we'll see you all around.
Okay. Thanks also to Chris LaFloria for supporting us. We
Yes,
can't do any
Chris.
of this without him. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank y'all.
Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Send any questions or concerns you have to TA Mitchell at Edinburgh.